Informatica discussing how they have leveraged DSPM to build a very strong data security program. Informatica is a Fortune 100 company. They have lots and lots and lots of data. They process data. They use lots and lots of data stores. They're multi-cloud. It's a challenging environment to secure, and they've needed a solution that can go and find data, classify data, and help them to protect customer data. We're going to have Toby Foss here, who will lead us in this discussion to understand their program, what they've leveraged, how they've leveraged it, and some of the challenges that they've overcome. Toby is a seasoned IT security professional. He's been doing this a very, very long time, and I'm going to hand it off to him to give a little bit of an introduction to himself.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Toby Foss. I'm a Senior Director of Information Security at Informatica. I've been doing this, as he said, for a while. I call it BB, which is before beard. So about 30 years of experience in computing and been working with clouds. Informatica itself deals with Amazon, Azure, GCP, and OCI. We have data in all four of those. And one of the challenges that we always face is no matter how well you think you know your environments, in traditional buildings you have one entrance and you're going in and out of that one entrance. But in the cloud environment, there's thousands of entrances, literally thousands of VPCs. And so finding a way to control that and understand what exactly you have inside is the challenge. So at Informatica, one of the tenets is we have lots of customer data, 20 plus petabytes a month of data transferring through our systems, and understanding exactly what you have and where you have it is a challenge.
Well, Toby, what are some of the requirements, the security requirements that you had that led you to the need for a DSPM type solution?
So we already talked about having a good understanding of what you have where, and consistently presenting that data is a challenge. There's kind of two parts to that. One of them is understanding where your data is and what data you have, and then the second part is how are you protecting it? Does the proper types of data have the proper controls and protections against it? And then kind of a third part of it is, can you prove it? We go through a lot of different audits from SOC 2 to SOX compliance to FedRAMP compliance to ISO 27001, and having all of that data and through all of those different compliances, you need to show that you're protecting all of that data across all four different cloud providers, and in our production, in our dev, in our QA environments, even in our test customer dev PLC environments, are always treated the same. Last thing we want to do is wake up in the news and find out we're in the news, so we want to keep all of that data secure.
So you find that eliminating these surprises is key to giving that confidence to your customers that you are protecting their data.
I was going to make one other comment is not only the surprises of knowing what data you have where, but that you're properly treating it. I don't know if anybody's following the news, but one of the vendors here just got caught with customer data in their test and dev environment, and they immediately had to take their test and dev environment off because they had customer data in a test and dev environment, and that's something we want to make sure we don't have. So having a continuous monitoring system that's always monitoring and saying, hey, did you know you have social security numbers in your test environment, or did you know that you're not protecting your production environment with customer PII data? That's the trick. Not only is it check it once and verify, but continually check it and make sure that you know.
Well, Toby, what emerging threats to your data concern you the most, and what are you planning to do to tackle these over the next few years?
So one of the things, anybody that's been in the industry for a while, it used to be easy when we had structured data. So you had a field that said, hey, this column has social security numbers, it's labeled social security numbers, so we know this data has social security numbers in it. But one of the big changes is now we're going to unstructured data. All this push on AI that you see outside, every single customer, including us, have the AI releases, and those AIs can do unstructured data. You don't have a field that's labeled as social security numbers or first name, last name, email addresses. You have data fields. And years ago, I used to work for a ticket tracking system, And it was real easy to say first name, last name, we knew those, but then you also had fields that were kind of like notes. And we had customers of ours, not the company that I worked for, but the customers that were using ours, store important data like put the customer's password in this notes field. There was no field called notes. They just put notes and instructions in the notes field that did have data that we needed to protect. So one of the emerging, I wouldn't call it an emerging threat, but a threat that's going to constantly get us is as we go from unstructured or from structured data with nice columns and fields to an unstructured where we have attachments, legal documents, or even pictures, etc. Those unstructured need to be protected, and your risk goes up as those unprotected data now has more and more risk associated with it.
How has implementing DSPM helped your organization in meeting these complex requirements, in discovering these data stores, discovering that data, and then in the end, meeting these compliance frameworks that you mentioned earlier?
So one of the challenges that you have with any DSP or with any large storage is understanding exactly what you have. Having a system that will monitor all of your data across all of your different environments is important. And then more importantly, having it continually monitor, continually manage, and give you updates. We have thousands of developers and thousands of users. And even though we have contracts that say, hey, never put your production data in our test environment, we still can't control that a customer may go put production data in a test environment. We may have a developer that wanted to just try out a special use case and put a load of data in a test environment, even though we're like, do not do it. So instead of telling them and putting administrative controls that says don't do it, we actually can put technical controls in place that says we know for a fact that there is no data in this, or we do know that there's data. Now we need to treat that test environment as if it's in production, or we need to treat that POC environment because it now has customer data in it, and we want to make sure that it's properly controlled.
So you mentioned earlier that you treat all of your environments like they're production, and really that comes into play when you find sensitive data, important data in environments that may not be originally classified as production. So when you find this data, you then change your process to treat it as production?
So when you know, the first hurdle is know what data is where. The second hurdle is, are you treating all of that data properly? Are you controlling it all the same way? You sure don't want to have production data in a test environment without proper monitoring or proper controls on it. And you want to make sure that the systems are hardened. But if you don't know that that system has potentially risky data in it, you may treat it differently. We may put less time into a QA environment or less time into a test environment, or maybe limit how much we're storing or how long we're storing it for. But when you go in front of the board, or I don't know if that was me. When you go in front of a auditor and say, yes, we treat all of our data the same way, it's important to be able to back that up with proof. So we can go and say, look, we really do what we say we do. Here's proof, here's continuous monitoring, here's the proof that we're doing exactly what we say we're doing.
And as far as proof, you're seeing in the changes to these compliance requirements that is now actually a requirement that you must prove this.
So, especially in the cloud industry, the requirements change constantly. So it's important that you stay ahead of what the compliance. You don't want to have to try and figure out how to meet a compliance requirement after it's already been published. You want that compliance up front, and you want to be able to say, look, we've already done that, we continually do that, and we're not trying to figure it out after the fact. So regardless of how the industry and how compliance, especially like SOC 2 and GDPR, are changing in their regulations, we can say we already have a strong program, and that we can just modify the program to meet new requirements, but not have to invent the wheel every single time a new compliance comes out.
Oh, Toby, if you could share an example with a finding that you've had related to data that your team has tackled, and how this has really shaped your data security practices.
So our legal department actually asked that we monitor our production, or our test POC, sorry, that they monitor our POC, our proof of concept environments properly. And so it's important that we manage that from the beginning. And one of the challenges we had when we very first brought Normalyze up, we found out that, hey, sorry, I'm getting distracted with the cheering here. It's not you guys, no. But the challenge with our environment was we put it in a POC where we started testing our POC environments, and then we started realizing that data that we were absolutely sure did not exist does exist. There are customers that were putting in live production PII data, and the last thing we wanted was to find out that our proof of concept test environments that shouldn't have any real live data in it actually did have real live social security numbers, had real live user data in it, because our customers wanted to try it out and were putting live data in it. So by putting that the DSPM in our environments, we know exactly how it's handled and managed early. And then we can also, it wasn't necessarily part of our compliance, but we could include it in our compliance models to say, hey, this would be SOC 2, this would be ISO 27001, this does meet GDPR.
So you find that data sprawl seems to be a real thing, and getting that proof, going through these environments, scanning all the data, even in places that you are certain that there is no sensitive data, is absolutely necessary.
One more comment on that is, we've noticed also that when we started the POC a couple years ago, or a year plus ago, our scope was much smaller, but just with the organic growth of my company and how much we're growing, the amount we're having to scan, and the additional services in the different regions and the additional places that we're having that data has been growing. For us, it's not too big of a deal because we already have the substructure and the architecture in place. All we have to do is tell it to go start monitoring a new environment, and it's already meeting all of the compliance requirements right from the build, not from trying to put it in after the fact.
Well, I appreciate you all coming in, listening to us talk about Informatica's data security program today. We have time for some questions. Are there any in the audience?
Couple questions. One is that now that you know where your data is and you know what is missing, this is more like a normalized question, but so from a security controls perspective, you need to protect or need to do something. Is Normalyze able to show you what control gaps you have, or is it something tell me, like, what does the DSPM give you right away so that you need to go and protect, delete, secure the data?
So I want to make a couple comments on that. So one of them is identifying what we have. So it can say, hey, did you know you have social security numbers in this database, for example. But the other thing it does is it gives us a risk metric. So we can say, hey, you have one social security number in this one database. It's not very risky. It was maybe somebody put a social security number in a notes field. Or you can say, hey, based on the risk value, did you realize you have tens of thousands of social security numbers with their associated names and their email addresses and their names? All of those things together give it a higher risk value. And we actually can, Normalyze will give us a score that says this is $1 million risk, or this is a 500K risk, or this is a $1 risk, by giving a monetary value. The other thing that we can do is we use a thing called an org ID, which is like a customer ID. Think of it as a social security number for a customer. But we can say, hey, that social security number, that org ID is valuable to us, not necessarily the industry. Nobody's going to know that an org ID is important or not. But for us, for our business, it's a core way we identify users and what products they're using and how much they're using. So to us, it's very important. So we can give it a score and say, hey, org IDs, if they're in the database, we need to protect them a little differently than maybe some other sort of data. Did that answer your question?
To add on that, on the CEO of Normalyze. So we provide for every risk comprehensive remediation steps that are AI generated, approved by tested by humans, by our research team, and we give you complete workflows to drive that remediation beginning to end. And that can be done in an automated way, or can be done as automated as you want it. And remediation can be from ticketing to automation to running scripts to whatever your DevSecOps teams would want to do to monitor remediation issues. And it can be all driven in an automated manner from the platform. Question for Toby. Can you comment a bit on your deployment in a multi-cloud hybrid environment, how you're approaching it, and any best practices or lessons learned that you can share with the audience?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we are in Amazon, Azure, GCP, and OCI. And anybody that's dealt with those four know that they're very similar, but also very, very different. You can't just use the best practice in the Amazon and assume that it's going to work the same way in OCI, or even that the architecture will be the same. But one thing that I will tell you is that some providers are better in some places than others. So whenever possible, try to find a solution that would be generic enough, and a general architecture that will work for all four of them, and apply that general architecture to each cloud provider. I think, and it's a long drawn out story, but I think in the industry and over time, we're going to see a convergence of all these different cloud providers into a standard model. But in the meantime, we still have compliance and we still have to understand what we have where. So by applying a standard generic architecture and then deploying it at each is critical. The other thing that we think that's critical is don't try to add it later. Add it right at the deployment time, right when you're bringing it up. By having it built into your processes early, you're not trying to retrofit something in later, you're having it there right at the beginning. And I wanted to make one other comment that I thought was important, and anybody that's been walking around the field, you'll see there's lots of different companies and providers doing different parts, but pay attention to just how deep each one goes. Some people will put DSPM as a splash of one of their 50 different things that they do, which means they've checked a box that says, oh yeah, we do DSPM, but when you actually look at what they're doing, they're like, oh, you give us a regex, and we'll do a regex against your database, and that's your DSPM. But that's not a full-out DSPM model. I sure wouldn't want to take that regex and apply it to a nodes field and find out if I have social security numbers or not.
Thank you everyone for coming. We're out of time, but Toby and I will be around for additional questions.